do you think the actions the U.S. has taken and this increase in aggressive rhetoric from the Chinese Communist Party, do you think that means they're closer to threatening some kind of war? Are they closer to invading Taiwan? Is this preventing that or leading to it?
Well, I think that it could be. I mean, it's hard to say, but it's certainly, again, I think it's back to this idea that the Biden administration made a huge mistake in saying, "Oh, we want to avoid a war at all costs." There's a word for that. It's called appeasement. And we learned in the 30s, appeasing Hitler was a huge mistake that led to a major war. And so, the trends are not good. I remember the late Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of Defense. He said, "Weakness is provocative." It's true. When you project weakness, it provokes aggressors into taking action. This was clearly evident as a result of the debacle of the Afghanistan withdrawal, which I think led at least Vladimir Putin in Russia to figure that the United States wasn't going to do anything if he invaded Ukraine. I think the Chinese are probably a little more circumspect, but they understand that they have been developing these asymmetric weaponry, what they call assassin's mace. It goes back to ancient Chinese strategy, which says, how does a weaker power defeat a stronger one? And they've been making tremendous progress. Take, for example, hypersonic missiles. The Chinese have developed an array of hypersonic missiles. These are ultra high-speed missiles. Now, ballistic missiles are also ultra high speed, but the difference is that hypersonic missiles can maneuver at these high speeds as they're going to their target. And this makes targeting them with missile defenses very, very difficult. And so now the Chinese have these hypersonic missiles. They have over 30 wind tunnels for developing these missiles. And that kind of gives you an indication of how big a program it is for them. The U.S. has probably one that's being used right now, and there's a crash program to try and match their hypersonic missiles. The Russians also are ahead of the United States. And by the way, the Chinese hypersonic missiles, they don't distinguish whether they're going to be armed with nuclear warheads or with conventional warheads. Whereas the U.S. has said already, because of anti-nuclear sentiment by the liberals and left within the United States, they've announced that the U.S. hypersonic missiles will not have nuclear warheads. So these are not going to deter, as we need to deter, both China and Russia from using these weapons.
You mentioned the assassin's mace idea, and to me, hypersonic weapons are not the scariest weapon the Chinese Communist Party has. To me, TikTok is a much bigger weapon that the Chinese Communist Party is leveraging.
Yeah. Oh man. I mean, TikTok. There's a push on Capitol Hill to try and ban that. The federal government has announced that it's going to ban it from federal devices. It's a huge information collection platform. Huawei Technologies is another company that the Trump administration successfully targeted. This was a company that was known to be working with the Chinese government. Again, there's a lack of understanding on the part of Americans about the nature of the Chinese Communist Party and its system. So I think it was in 2015, the Chinese Communist Party instituted a new regulation. I won't call it a law because they don't really have laws there, despite their propaganda to say that they're a law-abiding nation. This new regulation requires all Chinese companies to be able to allow Chinese intelligence through the Ministry of State Security or the Ministry of Public Security or the People's Liberation Army to access that data. So if you have a Huawei handset in China and probably anywhere else, that data is going directly, your personal data would be going directly to the Ministry of State Security. Now, what are they doing with the data? Now, this is another fascinating assassin's mace weaponry. They have been gathering masses and masses of personal data from the United States. And how have they done this? They've done this by attacking various institutions. I'll tick off a few. First was the Office of Personnel Management, which is the federal government's repository of federal records. They were able to steal some 2 or 3 million records from there, including some of the most sensitive information on our military personnel, our intelligence personnel, and our national security officials. Secondly, they went after U.S. national health providers, such as Anthem, stealing tens of thousands of personal records. They've also gone after hotels and airlines and stolen transportation data. So the question is, well, what are they going to do with all this data? They're going to take this data and then they're going to apply special artificial intelligence to that data. And from that data will emerge valuable tools for intelligence recruitment or targeting of people overseas that the Chinese Communist Party regards as enemies. So I would say it's both offensive and defensive in nature.
I think this ties into something that I know you've talked about, the idea that part of Marxist ideology is a different definition of truth. And you see this a lot with the Chinese Communist Party, like how, the big push in their propaganda the past couple of years has been saying, China actually has the best democracy.
So I think your point is that China is coming up with its different definition of, they actually see truth as meaning something a little different than we think of it as.
And that their whole social media push using TikTok and stuff is a way to actually change how people conceive of reality and truth.
Yeah, this is the information warfare that they're waging against us. They've stepped it up. In just the last few months, we've seen a major increase in attacks on the United States. Two glowing examples. Okay, so first was the Chinese response to the coronavirus pandemic, right? Began in Wuhan. They were able to influence the debate on that by first denying that it came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. And so for almost 2 years, the Chinese narrative was adopted by what I would regard as corrupt scientists outside of China in order to protect China from its critics. And it's really a remarkable feat that they were able to do that. Not only did they deny us access, and just in the recent weeks, there has been new information coming out about what happened at the Wuhan Institute, and people are starting to say, "Oh yeah, it came from the lab. Probably it's more likely it came from the lab." And yet, 4 intelligence agencies, as part of their formal assessment several months ago, said that, we still think it was natural emergence. Well, my question is, where's the evidence for natural emergence? The World Health Organization, along with the Chinese Communist Party, did a survey of 80,000 animals in China. And guess what? They didn't find a single animal that was carrying the COVID virus. So there's no evidence that it came from an animal. That's again, it's just pure speculation. And anyway, so the Chinese were able to obscure the source of the origin of COVID, and they blamed the United States. Their whole and yet there was never a strong reaction from the Western world, and specifically the United States. Similarly, on the war in Ukraine, Chinese propaganda and their official diplomats have been blaming the United States for causing the Russian invasion of Ukraine. And there's no pushback. I mean, we used to have what's known as the U.S. Information Agency during the Cold War. It went out of business in '99, and it was subsumed to the State Department, the same people that want to appease China right now. And they created something called the Global Engagement Center. And The Associated Press just recently ran a piece about how the Chinese were supporting the Russians through propaganda. And they quoted an official of this State Department agency as saying, well, we're really not going to go try and counter Chinese propaganda because it would be like whack-a-mole or something like that. So in other words, the State Department has literally surrendered the information warfare field to the Chinese. And we're getting killed in that space. We urgently need to have a regular, sustained effort to counteract Chinese Communist Party lies and deception.
I mean, that's China Uncensored. Just wish YouTube weren't constantly trying to shut us down.
And we certainly don't get any funding from the U.S. government.
Sadly, no.
You should be.
Yeah. It doesn't seem like they're really interested from what you're saying.
Yeah, but
No.
Of course, if the U.S. government funded us, then they might also say that for continued funding, we'd like you to please not cover the following topics, and then we'd be in trouble.